Hello and welcome to Guess the Handicaps, where we look ahead to the GAA weekend by, you've guessed it, guessing the handicaps. We're all about hurling this weekend. I'm Mick, and playing today are PJ and Gary as we look ahead to the Allianz Hurling League. We'll get to it in just a second. Of course, we are here every week for football and hurling, so please do hit that subscribe button. Let's get to it, lads. Okay, Gary and PJ here with me. It is all about hurling this weekend. No football. They're on a week off, and hurling returns after, even though we just had Kilkenny and Wexford in the rearranged fixture last week. 2 rounds to go and lots to talk about. We're going to stick with Division 1A and B, and a little twist this week, lads. Gary's back from a week's holidays. He was undefeated in Guess the Handicaps, as we know. PJ ran him very close, hit him to 2 tiebreakers in last week or 2 weeks ago in both the football and the hurling. But I popped in last week, beat PJ. So we don't know what to do. So we've decided we're going to have a triple threat this week where all 3 of us play. I don't know the handicap. Shane's knocking around behind the scenes here, ready to reveal it in visual form. Obviously, if you're listening on the podcast, I will fill in the blanks. But I'm all excited about this. I don't exactly know how we're going to work it tie-break-wise or whatever, or who's going to go. But I think what we'll go in an order of Gary's the defending champion. He gets first guess. It goes to PJ, then to me. Second round, PJ, me, Gary, and so on in perpetuity forever and ever and ever. So let's get started, lads, because Division 1A is where we want to start. It's Limerick versus Cork, Saturday, 7:15. Like, this should be a great game, but I actually have a problem with it. Limerick are, they've got 1 point. Cork have 5. Technically, they can catch them still if all kinds of mad things happen, but they're not going to catch Tip, Galway, and Waterford, who are all on 4 points. Limerick are basically out of it. And one of the things with the Change League this year is that there's really no jeopardy. There's no vulnerability there because Limerick are going to beat Westmeath next week. We're almost sure of that. And even if they don't, by some miracle, they'll have to lose another miracle match in a playoff against Laois or Antrim down the line. So really, Limerick are left with these 2 games to play for in a shortened league anyway, and nothing really going on. So it's a real problem with the new league format, PJ.
Definitely. It's such a strange season as well, which this is basically like a pre-season tournament this year. It feels like, the teams kind of experimenting. So I find it kind of hard to make any kind of absolute judgments based on this season alone, because like I said, it is just such a strange one. I don't know, how do you think, how would you bring jeopardy into it? Because it is very hard, because you've got these kind of top teams who are never really going to lose to like a Laois or a Westmeath, you would think. Although, I mean, Clare did lose to Antrim, I guess. So it's like, what you really kind of talking about is that there are no teams making like a breakthrough into the top tier of hurling who are capable of beating those, like what we say, like the top 8 or whatever they are. I think that's, this is like a symptom of that.
No, it clearly is, and that's obviously a bigger issue. But what we had for the last few years was an 8-team Division 1, in which, a quality team was getting relegated or 2 every year. Do you remember, there was a point where Limerick couldn't get out of Division 2 for years. They were finishing second or losing the league final every single year. And, it seemed like there was a lot of cribbing in hurling counties about this not being right, and everybody should be in Division 1. And it just waters it down so much. That's what's the point. But I actually am interested in both of your thoughts on it, because Kerry and Westmeath people here with an interest in how those developing counties do come on. And for me, that's a little bit more important. And is it worth, from your point of view, having a watered down league so that Westmeath can play Tip and Cork and Limerick and Waterford this year, Gary, even if they are getting beaten out the gate? Or would you prefer to be in a group with Carlow, Offaly, all these teams, and actually trying to get promoted in the same way as they do in the John McDonough?
Yeah, it feels like there's, like you were kind of saying there, there's too much appeasing of the traditionally strong counties going on by having these 2 Division 1s, and without them ever being in danger of being relegated. Could they not just do what they do in football, where they have, why can't Division 1A and 1B, as they are now, be split into Division 1 and 2, and you have the best in the top division, and then you could have Westmeath, Laois, Antrim all in the same division, and then a couple of the counties who are probably going to be a bit pissed off that they're in it, but at least they can, if you're good enough to be in the top division, earn promotion, earn the right to be there. So that seems like an obvious solution, because I suppose Division 1B is
16 groups instead of 8 teams, because that's actually interesting, because then there is a little bit more competitiveness there, but it is
exactly because like Division 1B is a bit different. It's because it's a little bit weaker and it has Laois and Antrim, so both of them are kind of targeting that game. But Westmeath are going out every week knowing they're going, like, I know they Westmeath are going out every week knowing realistically that they're going to be hammered. Like, I know we're on Waterford close, but you know, it seems a bit pointless to have Westmeath in that division when they could be in the division below and be having a couple of games that they could target to win. Like, it is ridiculous. Like, Limerick have had their worst start to a league campaign since 2010, and they're in no danger of being punished for it, really, which is a bit ridiculous. So I don't know. I think there's definitely something needs to be done about the structures of it, because it's too comfortable for those teams that like Limerick, you know.
Even if it's not in the weird year that it is now, like, we'll have quarterfinals next year, and Limerick will still be just a one win on their next 2 games, possibly away from making those quarterfinals. And you're thinking, God, like, I mean, they're not even being punished in the normal year, you know, in terms of like going to get the extra games. Now, I think they would have to win this match, and I'd just be interested in how they perform regardless of league structure for this. At home to Cork, like, not that I don't know how much home matters when there's no people there in a cavernous Gaelic grounds, but at the same time, you know, we talked a couple of weeks ago about how nobody is worried about Limerick, nobody's taking this dip in form seriously. You know, we know what they're capable of, and maybe they just needed to kind of try a few things during the league, but then they go out and they get well beaten by Waterford again, and it's just like, now you're just thinking, it's 3 matches now where they haven't performed. Can you just turn that on? So let's talk about this week first. Can they turn it on this week? And do you think the bookies think they can? And then we'll worry, I suppose, about the championship, maybe even next week before they you know, if they don't perform again. Gary, you're first up here for this one, Limerick versus Cork.
Yeah, it is such a hard one to judge, because, like we're saying, Limerick, they've been way under par so far, and Cork have been playing really well.
Yeah,
so
top of the league.
But you still think that the bookies are going to have Limerick as favourites because it's at home, and just because it's Limerick. So Limerick -3.
Okay, it goes to PJ.
It's
weird not knowing that my poker face is actually a real face.
I think it's about ironic that we were talking about the lack of jeopardy in the league as we shoehorn me back in here despite having lost 2 weeks in a row. It's like it's a very GAA thing to do. It's like if Waterford were somehow relegated from the Munster Championship by losing to like Joe McDonagh Cup winners Kerry, and the GAA decided, we can't have this emergency Congress. Waterford are back in. You know what? A 6-team Munster Championship isn't that bad.
No, I think you're exactly right there.
Yeah. And back to Limerick and Cork. A strange game, Limerick at home. I think Limerick will be favourites, and the bookies will be thinking about, like, they're All-Ireland champions. They were so dominant last year. That'll definitely be on the minds. But Cork look like they're playing pretty well. They've beat Waterford, drew a tip, hammered Westmeath. Maybe it's a little bit hard to cut. Like, Waterford didn't look great in that first week, I thought.
No, yeah, they definitely caught them a little bit on the hop. And even if you look at scores, I know that's not the way you should judge a game, because people score goals for a reason. But I think they only got 1 more score than Waterford over the course of the 70 minutes. You know, so it's a tight-ish game.
It's very hard to know what these teams are concentrating on. You know, if they're just like thinking of a championship and trying to peak for that. But I think Limerick definitely needed a performance here. But I think Limerick -2.
Okay. I would have said Limerick -2. I'm not going higher than Gary, which would be -4. So I'll have to say Limerick -1. And I do kind of expect Limerick to win the game, I have to say. Let's see it, Shane. Limerick -2. PJ gets off the mark with a win, and he has the honour going forward into the next game. So congratulations. That's on at Saturday 7:15. It's kind of the marquee hurling game of the weekend, you would think. But we're going to skip the next game in 1A and hold it. We might come back to it if there's a tie break, but it's Westmeath versus the also undefeated Tipperary. 2 draws and a win for Tip so far. You'd imagine they will get the second win, or their second win on Sunday at 2:00. But the other game in Division 1A then is another cracker, the 2017 All-Ireland final, Galway versus Waterford, 3:45 on Sunday. I have to say I liked I know I don't want to make every Galway conversation about Joe Canning, and look, Waterford, PJ are probably even a more interesting team to talk about here, but I liked Joe in midfield a couple of weeks ago. It was an interesting, he looks he looks heavier, and not in an unfit way, but he looks like that little bit slower and that little bit bulkier, and yet he's still kind of dancing through, lads. He got a great point in the first half where he looked like he was moving in slow motion, but it still seemed like he was he just still had a yard on people. But I don't know what the story is, if David Burke is injured or he's not coming back into the team or moving on or whatever it is. But I wonder, is Joe the answer to filling that position alongside Cohen there? But they're definitely going to try it again anyway.
Yeah, my presumption is they think he'll be able to take advantage of space. He'll be able to manufacture for himself in midfield that he might not get if he was closer to goal in like the half forward line or the half forward line, because he is such a good passer of the ball and he has such incredible vision. Maybe I presume that they think this is where he can exploit that. So it is it's good. Like, it is one of these experimental moves that you wouldn't usually see so close to the championship, you'd think. But yeah, it's like this kind of latter stage of his career. It is interesting that they still think that there's more to be. They're trying to extract as much as they can from him. So far, Galway have beaten Westmeath, beaten like that win against Limerick. You thought, oh, like Galway are clear second favourites for the All Ireland here. Like that was the way most people kind of thought about it at the time. Then they got to lose the Tip, kind of disappointing. Waterford have won the last 3 league games against Galway, which is quite interesting. They're and I do like them as a team to be an All Ireland contender this year. I think Galway at home. I've Galway -2 written down here. I think I'm gonna stick with that.
Okay.
Yeah, Galway -2.
Galway -2. I don't know what to do on this because Waterford. It's funny, you were talking about them as All Ireland contenders a couple of weeks ago. You're saying it even again. They've got better as it's gone on so far, and you have to remember where they came from last year and the job that Liam Cahill did, and actually they never do get the respect in the numbers, in these things that we're thinking of, until suddenly they'll be almost over respected, and people will they'll have a big win somewhere along the line and people will decide they're going to win the All Ireland, but I think I would actually have Galway favourites, and whether that's fair or not, I don't know. The Galway Tip game, there was such a league game to that in a way, in that it was very good for 50 minutes. And then the result didn't seem to matter all that much for the last 20. Tip kind of pulled away a little bit. Galway let it happen. I just wonder if that would happen if it was a championship game. We saw them last year, and God only knows how many times before in the last decade or so, those two teams, when they do come up against each other, are so evenly matched. So I wouldn't write off Galway because of it. I don't know how disappointing it was, if you know what I mean. I don't know how seriously people are taking the results of these once they're kind of in decent position, as Galway were in their first 2 games. What did you say? You said Galway -2.
Yep.
I'm gonna go higher. It could be Galway -3. Gary.
Yeah, I think this is kind of weirdly, it's kind of a big game for Galway, because like PJ was saying, after they beat Limerick, everyone's like, okay, here's the team to go and take Limerick's crown. If anyone's going to do it this year, it's them. But then to go out and lose the Tip, I know what you're saying. It was a close game. They didn't really seem to want it, is probably the wrong term, but they didn't really push for the result as hard as they could have. If they go out and lose to Waterford, then again this weekend, then it's like, okay, they've after losing to Tip and Waterford in consecutive games. Does that who are possibly they're definitely probably 2 of the top 5. So it's kind of definitely questions whether Galway can be the team to beat Limerick. I think even though it is only a league game, but like we're saying, we're so close to championship,
I still have serious concerns over the amount of people that Galway are bringing through. You look at their team now, and you've got their first choice team. You weed it out a little bit, and you think who's going to stay there in championship, and maybe goalkeeper, cornerbacks, and Brian Concannon at corner forward in your first choice are probably the only changes from the All-Ireland winning team of 4 years ago. You know, and it's hurling, like, you know, these things, and I'm just thinking, like, I could be wrong on that, but that's what it seems to me, is that you're probably talking about maybe a 4-player change around from an All-Ireland winning team 4 years ago. It just doesn't feel like enough for me, I have to say. And I know that's it's crap that the game has gone that way, that you can almost like build a team on who you have, but especially in hurling, it just does seem like you need 2-3 guys every single year.
Yeah, and it feels like
sorry, I was about to say, I probably add Evan Nyland to that as well. I think, like, if Canning does play midfield, I think Evan Nyland might come into the half-forward line.
Yeah,
he looks like a player which is maybe starting to fulfill potential you would have seen a few years ago.
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, it seems like every top team has at least 1 or 2 like top 21, 22, 23-year-olds that they depend, even in football as well. It's kind of going that way. Every big team seems to have those players now, so that could have an effect. But going back to the handicap, I think it probably will be -2 or -3. So I'm kind of screwed there, but I don't think it'll be -1. So I'm probably just going to have to say -4 for Galway.
Oh, if it is,
I think Waterford could win this game. Actually, you know, I do think like Waterford definitely a chance of winning this game.
100%. I just don't think. I think it's more likely to be minus. No, well, I don't. It's going to be -2 or -3. So
okay, go on,
my guess doesn't matter.
Reveal it. It's -2. PJ had it from the start. The whole last 5 minutes was pointless. Let's move on to Division 1B. So as PJ takes a 2-0 lead here, he could finally get off the mark. There's only 3 games left, and me and Gary could split points, or anything could happen here. But Antrim Wexford, 3:00 on Saturday. We've talked for a couple of weeks now about Antrim targeting games, lads. But this is like this. They will again be targeting this one. They're playing Westmeath next week. You know, if they lose that head to head, they're in trouble. So they actually would like to get something out of this game just to kind of keep them safe.
Laois next week, Mick. Sorry, isn't it?
Laois, sorry, yeah, not Westmeath. Sorry, the other team, bottom of the barrel. Sorry. But like for Antrim, you do want to see that progress turn into results and to get another scalp. It's easier said than done, but Wexford don't seem fully at the races, I have to say. From a Clare point of view, that's worrying, because their one performance was injury time against Clare a couple of weeks ago. But, you know, well beaten by Kilkenny, the whole COVID bullshit seeming to get to them. But at the same time, bullshit or no, you don't want few cases of COVID going through your squad when you're trying to play a game every single week, as they are at the moment. And you just wonder, they have on years and off years with Davy, and they do reveal themselves pretty quickly, you know, and you almost expect them to bounce back after a disappointing year last year. But what if they don't, you know? And I don't know whether we'll see much from this week that'll prove that one way or another. But at the same time, I definitely would be worried if I was a Wexford fan.
Yeah, like obviously the COVID thing is, you can't really account for that, and it seems to have had a negative impact on them. But also, in a way, I think Davy is probably secretly loving, like, he was out again during the week there talking about this so-called media campaign against Wexford with the, you know, the way it was being reported on and stuff. He's going to love creating that siege mentality. We always say that about him, and any excuse, you know that. But whether that's going to work or not, it's a completely different thing. But they need, there's going to be serious alarm bells ringing if they don't win fairly comfortably this weekend, I'd say.
Yeah, it's my turn to pick the handicap. I've just realised. So this is the famous Corrigan Park, which is not the easiest place to go, as Clare found out. And I have to say, I would just whatever about like what will happen, I would just love to see Antrim just giving this another rattle and making that a bit of a fortress, and this place that, you know, come next year's Division 1, everybody doesn't want to be drawn away to. So I would, unless Casement Park, there's no chance of that being redeveloped by next year. I think it will play a couple of points difference in the handicap, but I think Wexford will still have a fairly decent size. I'm going to go -6. I'm going to go Wexford -6. Is that fair?
Gary up next?
Gary is up next, yeah. Sorry, I realised I haven't let you in on this one yet, PJ. So you can keep all your hot takes to your guess.
I won't hold you up too much, PJ. I think the bookies are still always wary of giving the lesser teams in Division 1 too low of a handicap, even though it might be deserved in this case. So in that case, I'm going to overcut Mick and say -7.
Yeah, this is the first time these two teams have met in the league since 2015, and Wexford only won that game by a point. They were in a bad state at that time. I think that there was pre-Davy a little bit. Yeah, I think that
I think
the game against Kilkenny finally kind of figured Wexford out. Seemed to be the story of that game. That it was Kilkenny first win against Wexford in 6 or 7 games, I think it was.
Wow, really?
Yeah, which it's like a really good record that Davy and Wexford had against Kilkenny. Yeah, so that game was really over by halftime. Wexford came back into it like a little bit, but Kilkenny figured out that system. So I think Wexford definitely favours this game. Although the Antrim will target this like the Dublin game. I think Antrim should be thinking we can win this game because they're up against a team in a vulnerable list kind of spot. I had -6 written down initially, but I'm starting to think that in previous weeks the bookies went with larger handicaps than we would have expected.
Yeah,
I'm going to say -8.
Okay, so -6, -7, -8 are the 3 guesses we went for, and it is -7. So Gary's back in it. I'm virtually out with a couple of games to go. Be interested to see that one. Another thing about that game, lads, is that obviously there is a slight colour clash, which means that I presume Wexford will be wearing their snazzy new away jersey that you may have seen, which is the black jersey with some purple and gold sort of faded in. It's actually quite nice, I have to say. It's an ongoing thing this year. It seems to be like I don't mind teams having weird colour away jerseys if they do blend some of their county colours into it. And actually Mayo, who've consistently had weird away jerseys that have nothing to do with their colours, have done that really well this year as well. A black one with the green and red down the front. So I have to say I'm a fan of both jerseys. I don't know what you think, Gary. Jersey aficionado. Wexford very rarely on them.
Yeah, Wexford have had class jerseys for the last few years, to be fair. But yeah, this is a belter. I'm a big fan of that Mayo one as well. I think the Mayo one it's very something different. It doesn't look like a G. It almost looks like I don't want to sound sacrilegious, but it almost looks like a soccer jersey. But that's what makes it stands out more. But yeah, and that was designed by a 6-year-old girl as well. So fair play to her.
Let her take over on
wheels. Maybe.
Okay, so that's Antrim Wexford. The other games in Division 1B then that we have to get to: Dublin versus Clare. Big one for me. This is the Clare games I used to be able to go to back in the day, the Clare League games.
Mick McCarthy Derby, I think they're calling it, are they?
I think that's what they usually call it, yeah. Dublin versus Clare, 5:15 on Saturday. This is a massive game for both teams, but it won't get massive national attention or anything like that. But where are Dublin is this consistent question that we have every year. Are they making any progress at all? Are they getting back to that top tier that they were under Anthony Daly? And to do that, you got to have a scalp or two in the league, and playing Clare at home in the form that Clare are in is exactly where you do. But at the same time, if you're looking from Clare's perspective, I always remember as when Clare were going through the wilderness years in kind of the mid to late noughties, I remember thinking but you'd still never expect them to lose to Dublin. And when they met Anthony Daly's Dublin, I think in 2010, maybe it was 2011 even, and they lost them in a qualifier, it was like a real signal of this is gone. You know what I mean? This team is nowhere. They're the worst team in Ireland, even though Dublin were on the rise. You know what I mean? It's mad that you would have this psychological feeling about certain teams and certain matchups, and Clare would always fancy themselves to beat Dublin. If they don't, there's going to be serious questions asked this week.
Vic, me or Gary is up next?
Gary is up for the first guess, but whoever wants to come in on either of the topics, feel free.
Yeah, it's a big game. It is a big game for both teams because, like you're saying, Clare lost Antrim. If they go up, lose to Dublin, that's pretty much disaster territory. If they said that at the start of the league campaign, well, I'm not going to say no one would have really believed it, but we had no Clare were in a bad place after it. And for Dublin, like, they've beaten Antrim and Laois, who obviously no disrespect to them, but are two teams that they would be expected to beat like 99 times out of 100. So, like, they kind of have to win this game too.
Played well
like
against Kilkenny, but didn't win. Like, you know,
but
that's
didn't
where
win, yeah.
with Dublin now, they have to be winning some of these games. Like, you can't just be in them all the time. Like, you know.
Exactly. So, like, I think both teams have to win. I think it's going to be a very close one. It's going to be hard to call because, like you're saying, we don't really know where either team is at. Dublin, I think, will be favourites because of home advantage. I'm going to say Dublin -1, I think, is what I'm going to go for.
Clare won this game by 9 points last year. I think it's going to be a lot closer than that.
Yes, yeah.
I actually think Clare will be favourites for this. They've Dublin have beaten Laois and Antrim. Like, it's very hard, and only lost Kilkenny by 5, which is, I take a lot more from that than I would the other two games. But I think Clare, I've just a feeling Clare are going to be favourites here. I'm going to say Clare -1.
Okay. I think Clare will be favourites too. I have to say, I think that there's still a kind of a lingering respect there for a lot of the players, and you know, there's a Tony Kelly can beat them on his own sense. There's still some very good hurlers there, as there are on both teams, really. You know, I think Clare will be -2, and I think what I'd be interested in even talking about next week is if Clare are to do anything this week with a week off, Laois game the week before, and after the first shocking 2 weeks of the league, I think this is to be their statement performance, and they can go and take the Kilkenny game off or whatever, you know, like not worry too much about it and know that they can go into the championship and have a chance to do themselves justice. So I think Clare will be taking this game very seriously. And if they're to do anything this year, I think they'll win it. I'm going to go -2 though, is what I guess the handicap to be, and it is Clare -1. PJ had it all sussed from day one. He goes into an unsurmountable lead of 3. He will take the title off the actual champion and the interim champion and become the undisputed Guess the Handicaps champion. But in a dead rubber of a final round, we look ahead to Kilkenny versus Laois, 1:45 on Sunday, Division 1B, and the only 1B game on Sunday this week. Poor old Laois, the cheddar return hasn't gone too well. I was going to make a bad cheese joke.
No, do. I want to hear it.
I don't. It wasn't well thought out, to be honest, PJ. I don't know if it makes any sense.
Okay,
but
come back with your cheese joke next week.
I will. I'll have a cheddar joke matured for next week.
Oh, yeah. There we go.
Oh, I totally redeemed myself there. Kilkenny versus Laois. Kilkenny, this is what I was thinking actually when you were talking about this, Gary, in the last one was, are Kilkenny, it was PJ, you were saying that when they only beat Dublin by 5. Have Kilkenny been secretly impressive so far in the league in what's a poor enough division, but they beat Wexford for the first time in however long you mentioned, but they did it well. They beat Dublin, and Dublin got all the plaudits, but they beat them handily, you know. And then they beat Antrim. Obviously, they conceded a couple of goals to Antrim, and people were like, "Oh, what's going on there?" But you know, Antrim have been fairly decent. You know, I wonder if there's a sort of a sense in Kilkenny is like, we'll quietly go about this. We'll get all our pundits, Richie Power, Jackie Tyrrell, someone else I can't remember, complaining about the death of hurling and the end of physicality, and we'll have all of them, instead of analysing Kilkenny matches, we'll send them off on tirades. This is Cody's written all over this, like, you know. He is distracting attention, and then they're just going to come out and win the All-Ireland.
Was this Cody's plan all along, that to have these to send these lads out into the punditry world? Like, he sat them all down in the Nolan Park one evening and said, "Lads, this is the long-term plan here. You'll make a handy few. You'll make a few pound off it as well." Impressive thing about Kilkenny this year, they have used 28 players so far in 3 games, which is really, you know, we see the consistency with other teams, like say like Galway, even with like Waterford a little bit. The teams are experimenting a little bit, and don't see that consistency of performance. That's been there, seems to have been there so far with Kilkenny. Like someone like Billy Ryan got 1-4 last week. Adrian Mullen is coming back in. Brian Cody is really kind of building options for himself in this, which is something that's something he loves to do, is to ensure there is that incredible competitiveness in the panel. It's just like you wonder with this handicap how much is too much. Like Laois, I think long term, Cheddar Plunket is going to do a good job at Laois. I like looking like last year. He did a really good job with James Stevens in the Kilkenny Championship. They came really close to. They pushed like Ballyhale. I think it was in the Kilkenny semi-final. He was their coach, and they pushed Ballyhale all the way. Like on the crisis in hurling, to me it feels like people are people are running around with their hair on fire about what's going on like in hurling, when really teams aren't back that long. They had very little training to do. Hurling is such like very little trained. Hurling is like such a technical sport. It's hard to it can be hard to hit the ground running. I think referees had very little time themselves to prep for. There was new rules, to prep with how they were going to apply them. It's just like I'd be reserving judgment on a lot of this until the end of the championship. Think back to one of the best hurling games in the last 6 months was Kilkenny Waterford in last year's All-Ireland semi-final. A fantastic game. That's what if I'm thinking about where hurling is, that's what I'm thinking about, that game, rather than
few games
this preseason league, this preseason tournament, basically. The handicap in this, I'd -16 written down here. I think that's way too low. The more I think about it, -16 it's just too low. I'm going to say Kilkenny -20.
I was going to say 20 is like the benchmark of an absolute, it's 1 to 100 in the odds or something like that. That's unbelievable. But it could be that. I'm next, I think. Am I? I want to talk about two things actually before I guess the death of hurling conversation. I think you're so right. I would have serious concerns about long-term trends, and about all the things that they're saying is right. But there is an element of stop panicking, because this isn't real yet. If this is still happening in a couple of months, absolutely be concerned. But let's not tear our hair out. This is, it is certainly over the top at the moment. And I wonder, is there a reaction to poor football people, but have put up with this for years, where is one sport is being eulogized and constantly talked about as this greatest thing of all time, and the other one is they can do nothing right, and it's flipped on its head. So that even a good game of hurling now at the moment is, oh Jesus, there's no football. I always remember PJ, I've definitely mentioned this to you before, that there was possibly the most enjoyable game of Gaelic football I've ever seen in my life was the first semi-final between Kerry and Mayo in 2014, the one that was a draw in Croke Park. And there was a point halfway through the second half where it was so thrilling you couldn't even sit down in your seat. And this is as a neutral. And Tommy Carr on commentary goes, "My God, this is so good. It's almost like a game of hurling."
One of the most football people of all time. One of the great football men.
Exactly.
I think sometimes it's did Michael Cusick put it down in when they were forming the GAA? Did he say that at all times one of our sports must be in crisis?
I think so.
It's like he said that. Why does one of them all have to be in crisis? Could rounders not be in crisis? You don't hear much from rounders at the moment, or poor old handball. Can one of those not be in crisis? And football and hurling, we can both say they're in a good place.
Yeah, they're in perpetual crisis, unfortunately, those sports. But yeah, there are concerns, but let's take it easy. And then the other thing I wanted to say about Kilkenny was, you mentioned Billy Ryan. Billy Ryan's been around a while. There's a good few of these players that in the old, when they were being brought through, it was a very, very difficult thing to do on the back of greatest team of all time. There aren't many spots available. Guys are getting little bits of runs in league. There's a lot of expectation on them. If you don't set the world on fire, you're gone, because you know why? Eddie Brennan's going to come back into the team, and it's of course he is. And that's kind of going to happen anyway. over the last few years, when they haven't had those players, they've kind of had like, TJ and Colin Fennelly, especially in the forwards, kind of holding things down, and all the other greats have come and gone. There's been more time for these lads to settle in and become their own players. And I think it's interesting that some of these guys are starting to shine now. And it's because they've actually been given that room to grow and let the team become theirs a little bit, and it is one of the consequences of, we know that there's enough good hurlers in Kilkenny for them to always have a good team, but it's like, do they fit in? Have they got the Cody reps under their belt? Are they part of the team? Can they feel leadership? I think it's very interesting, and it's one of those things with a county like Kilkenny that could turn around very quickly and very suddenly. And that's why I was like posing, are they secretly the team this year? And that's all really I'd say. I'll let Gary come in, and I will just say, I'm not going to be as mad as you, PJ, but I've nothing to play for anyway. I'll say Kilkenny minus 19.
Yeah, well, I know you're talking about the Kilkenny punditry oligarch there a couple of minutes ago, trying to dampen down expectations. But Henry Shefflin has actually been in the media today talking up Kilkenny and saying basically exactly what you were saying. Like, are they kind of secretly perfectly ticking along? And he kind of says, Limerick are obviously the favourites. Galway, he says, are probably the second favourites. But then Kilkenny are like they're not far behind Galway at all. And he also, something you mentioned, PJ, as well, saying about beating Wexford, he says was a massive game for them because Brian Cody was finally able to figure out that system that Wexford play, something that they had struggled with. So it definitely does seem like Kilkenny are just nicely ticking along, and you wouldn't be surprised to look up and see them in an All-Ireland final in August at all.
Last year.
I know, to be fair, and when nobody was like, but this game, I don't know. Minus 18, why not? It's probably less. Probably it's more likely to be less than 20 than more than 20. So.
Okay, let's see what it is. It is Kilkenny minus 15. So Gary gets the points there. A pathetic performance for me. I'm sacked for next week. Gary might get a rematch, having been beaten 3-2 in the end. PJ, of course, with nothing to play for in the last game. A consolation goal by Gary at the end of the game. So, look, if the Hurling is exciting as Guess the Handicaps this week, it might be a week to skip the GAA and wait for the double-header weekend next weekend. But, look, I'm sure there's a lot to look forward to there. There is obviously a bit to play for. And I think we are getting to the point where we're going to see a little bit more from teams as we approach. It's their second last game before they get very, very quickly into Championship Hurling in a couple of weeks. Thanks a million to Gary, the former champ, finally loses the O and almost go. And it is Gary's and PJ who finally gets a win. An O in the win column disappearing as well. And of course, me humiliated as usual, some would say. But thanks a million for watching or listening. If you are watching on YouTube, please do hit the subscribe button. We're here with you every week. Lots of videos throughout the week on the Balls channel as well. We'll be back with you next week for 2 shows of Guess the Handicap, a football and a hurling one. So join us then.